Okay, Dad, so if somebody does have these intellectual problems, where might they start to look for the answer to these intellectual problems?
Yeah. Now we'll get a little intellectual on you, but there's a word that's used a lot named apologetics. That's a word they'll probably need to learn. Apologetics. And all apologetics is a defense, an apology for something. This is why I believe something. This is a support. So there are all types of apologetics. And so they need to decide what area of apologetics that they've got concerned over. And in my case, as I mentioned, it was a historical and a credibility of the Bible. In other words, could I believe it? And some people's it might be philosophical.
What do you mean by philosophical?
A philosophical is this is one that most people will get hung up on or use. A philosophical one: if God's perfect, how could there be evil in the world, and how could this be existing? Yeah, I'm not going to do this one today with you. In terms of, if you want to set up another time when we do the problem of evil, I don't mind doing it. But let's not confuse that with the problem of accepting the Lord, nor confuse it with the issue of growing in Christ, which is often referred to another big word, sanctification. But all that means is that you love Christ and you're walking with Him daily, and the sin that's still in you, He's either burning out like you would dross and gold, or grinding out like you would impurities and silver. He's working those through. Mm-hmm. And so I forgot where I was. So philosophical. And so, but there are interesting philosophical arguments. They're one of my least favorite. They never come to firm conclusions. They don't have arguments against them. But the philosophical arguments for and against are in my opinion, stronger for. So where would I start if they were? Let me just mention a couple of places you might start. A couple of places you might start if you're not really, be honest with yourself about this. But if you just want to take a cursory look and not get into it at a real deep level, there are a lot of books out there. Lee Strobel's written a lot of books. One of the names of them I can't think of them off the time. The Case for Faith, The Case for Christ, and so. But they're always the case for, which of course is apologetics. The case for is more of a legal type of term for apologetics. Here are the facts for this. And so one of the things that you need to find out from the case for, the first case would be, did Christ really raise from the dead? If you happen to be somebody listening to this and you want to get rid of this horrible Christian thing that's bringing society down and causing people to believe all kinds of things that aren't right, very simple to do. If you want to get rid of all Christian beliefs, prove Christ did not exist and that He did not raise from the dead. Because if Christ is not risen, as a Christian, our hope is in vain. Because we believe that He was risen from the dead. Now again, I'm not going to get into all the evidences about Christ is risen from the dead, but if you will, I'll just give you a couple. One, clearly, He was dead and buried. The Romans that crucified Him were professional, I want to call them murderers, but what do you call it, executioners. They knew the difference in a dead and alive person. Mm-hmm. And this is what they did for life. And on top of that, they poked his heart. So they knew He was dead. What's the matter with me now? Forgetting it wasn't Pontius Pilate. It was what was it? He knew He was dead. They had His people double check Him. They sent and guarded the tomb with special forces, which were real powerful, but I forget what they call them, but they had a special unit of the Romans go and guard that tomb overnight. Those Romans came back. These are professionals. These would be like our SEALs of the day, the best of the best. They came back and said, "Oh, we fell asleep and somebody came and took him." And of course the Jews of that period were very much wanting to prove that Jesus had not risen, and they had all kinds of reasons to believe, which are interesting to read, but they just are not credible. I'm sure there are, again, people who have, but I've never met anybody who's looked into that thoroughly for themselves who doesn't come away the opposite. They come away more believing this had to happen. Oh, and by the way, that's all kinds of well-known Christians started out as atheists, intent on proving that Christ didn't exist and that God didn't exist, and they start studying the facts and they go, wow. But there were people who were willing to be honest with themselves when they started studying the facts. Mm-hmm. So, what was your question? Did that get me in the right direction?
I think that was it.
Oh yeah, I remember what. So, if you want to, where you start, you might first start by reading something like that. Lee Strobel's some of those cases. I can't remember if he has good bibliographies or not. I actually don't think he did have particularly good bibliographies. But first you need to decide if you believe that Christ could have actually risen, although that's not the way I did it. That might be one approach. Another approach might be to study ancient history. This is a more time-consuming way. I think a really good book for an overall view here on this is something called Haley's Handbook, Haley's Bible Handbook. And I guess I'm going to give a plug for Haley's Handbook, period. And I used it fairly extensively. Haley's Handbook for the non-believer has a section on every single book of the Bible, and it just gives you a little something to read about it and what that is about. It also has a section for different periods of time to let you know about what. It's a fairly long book. It's not fairly long. It's long. I guess a couple thousand pages or something. But different periods of history. So to me, this will tell you how you get a little esoteric as you grow in the Word. But to me, one of the more interesting periods of time is between the Old Testament and the New Testament. There were 400 years where there was no word from the Lord. It'll give you some of the history of that. It'll give you history of, if you would, denominationalism. It's some of the history of the Catholic Church and some of the denominations, the Reformation. So it'll help you put the Bible in perspective and ancient. It doesn't really do much of anything that I can remember. Again, I haven't been to Haley's Handbook a long time. It's probably been 20 years since I've done much in that. But I don't remember it doing much about from maybe the Nicene Creed period on, which would be 300 years after Christ, or in a time when the Roman government declared Christianity the nation's religion. So now, the thing that I like about Haley's Handbook, it'll be a rare person who needs to just pick it up and read it cover to cover. And so they read over a period of a couple of years and parts that make the most sense to you and you're interested in now. In fact, I mentioned archaeology. It's got a fabulous archaeology segment. And if I remember correctly, it does have good bibliography. It'll put you, like, if you get into archaeology, it's going to put you Munger, who I mentioned earlier. It'll take you to his source books, and his source books take you to actual source text. And what do I mean by that? Source text is the actual writings and the pictures and where the things are and what museums that were documented at the time they looked. Then Munger writes summaries of that. source texting the actual evidences, and then somebody like Haley writes summaries of the summaries. Here are the big pictures, or just takes out the highlights, and there's some incredible highlights. God, I'd love to talk about some of those now, but that's inappropriate. But because we were talking about the big picture, so Haley's would be a tremendous book to use to help get to the big picture of the times the Bible was written in, what it means, how to go through it and read the 66 books, who the different writers were of the books. The book thing was been written over, 1,500 years it took to write the Bible, and I don't know how many authors. 66 books. Boy, I don't know. I'm guessing now 40 authors or something. It's a lot. Know many continents, and how does it all pull together like it does? It's amazing. So that's actually one of the reasons to believe. So, but if you get there and get through that, I don't think you're likely to get through there that much into. In fact, I don't know that I know anybody that's read the entire Bible that isn't a believer. It doesn't. They really literally read all the way through. But if at that point you still have concerns for yourself, to me, one of the classic writers, and I like him more than some of the more recent ones, is a guy named Josh McDowell, and Evidence That Demands a Verdict. And don't open this one up thinking you're going to read it from start to finish. It's not easy, and he wrote it. And again, I haven't seen the recent updates of it, but the ones that I was reading in the 70s were actually outlines with tremendous bibliographies going so you could read source text, and so and the background for all of this stuff and substantiation. So it goes through all the different types. In fact, that'd be a good place to start if you want to know what apologetics is in general. Just look at his table of contents. It'll be lined up, and again, I haven't prepared for this, so I could go get it. I'm in a small house now. I don't have my library, but if I did, I'd have Josh McDowell's, and I'm about 90% confident that his table of contents we does about a list of apologetic segments and ways of studying and thinking about the Bible, and ways of the consistency and the trust that we can have in the Bible. I do think that even after you've become a Christian, studying these things is important. And why? And real simple, the importance of trust. So can I segue now and talk about the importance of trust?